All right, so hello. It's been a while. It's about 2 weeks. I think things change very rapidly in the course of 2 weeks, and now I think we're in a different chapter of this whole pandemic right now. But anyways, today our guest is Kenneth Tang, a teacher at the Garvey School District. I'm running for Alhambra Unified School District School Board, and I wanted to bring him on because we had a long, lengthy conversations about how race should be taught in schools, and um, with this renewed conversation about defund the police and what is policing in the community should look like. I think this would be a well worth while person to have on a podcast. So um, I hope you enjoyed this podcast with Kenneth Tang, and I think we're just gonna start. It's like, do you want to introduce yourself any further? Like, is there anything else that me and the audience should know about you?
Well, certainly. My name is Ken Tang. Um, Actually, my given name is spelled Kien,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I plan to change that back eventually when I have the chance.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm a Vietnamese immigrant from
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam. Lived in the refugee camp for a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
as we escaped Vietnam at the age of 6. We left Vietnam in 1978, but I did not get to the United States until 1980, October 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in Phoenix because that's where my uncle um, sponsored us, and that's where he lived. So we lived with him for about 6 months before moving to Alhambra, which I grew up in, a product of the Alhambra School District.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated from Marquette High School, went on to get my child development degree from Cal State LA, as well as my teaching credential.
Mm-hmm.
Being a first generation immigrant and a I guess first one in my family to even graduate from high school, let alone college. I got accepted to UCLA, but never was able to attend UCLA because we couldn't afford it, and I was never given the proper counseling, I guess. And in a sense, I'm kind of grateful for that because I didn't graduate with a load of debt in my hand. So also very I'm very big on advocating for public education and students and social justice, as I am one of the elected board of directors of the National Education Association, one of 200, and probably I guess 3 out of 200 that is Asian American. So we have quite a bit of work to do in the areas of getting ourselves out
there. Yeah. In terms of racism and studying that, I watched a little bit of our current president's rally yesterday, and he was speaking at Mount Rushmore, saying that that students are being taught this idea of hate or something like that, and I was just like, what is that coming from? And I wanted to kind of connect that with one of the questions is and we've had discussion on how to teach race in schools, but do you think that tackling the topic of racism in elementary schools and in high schools in the US is considered un-American? Like and if not, like how can teachers approach that subject with their students?
I think the topic of racism is not so much an American topic or issues, but it's a world issue. I truly believe that as human beings, we are all created equal and all should be treated equally. Doesn't matter whether you are in Vietnam, whether you're in China, whether you're in the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, Spain, France, England. It doesn't matter where you're at. This whole idea of hate is taught,
Mm-hmm.
and why are we, you know, teaching that? I don't think we purposely teach that. I think it's done accidentally. More so, I guess. It's more so taught in the United States than anything else because the privilege will always want to stay at the top, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's that divide where I'm better than you type of attitude. I'm more superior, and it's been ingrained for generations. From our history way back when. Um, when the Europeans, the white folks went and basically captures Africans and even South Asians and enslaving them bringing them to the United States. These are the type of histories that our students need to learn, and racism definitely should be taught as
Mm-hmm.
early as preschool,
Mm-hmm.
because if you look at kids interacting with each other, um, they don't see that. They don't see colors. They don't see black, white, yellow,
Mm-hmm.
Asians, Hispanic, Native Americans, or otherwise. And they play with each other until someone says that you can't play with that other person because they look
Mm-hmm.
different.
Right.
And so we really need to tackle this idea or this topic of racism, that's deep rooted,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, from very early childhood, because as students, as kids grows up, um, these things stays with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yes, it's definitely very important that we, as an elementary school teacher, and I'm excited to go back to the classroom teaching second grade, because now I can even focus more in regards to making sure that my students understand that they are citizens of the world. They are citizens of their society, and
Mm-hmm.
that we need to make sure that we create a better society for ourselves and for our future and for the future generations.
Well, on the subject of elementary schools, I don't know if you were brought up in California education system in elementary school, but we were taught a certain history of Californian colonial past, right? And with some with the movements right now to take down Confederate statues and other leaders in the past, in California in particular, there are some people that are taking down statues um, of this missionary that was like
Father Sierra.
yeah, Father Sierra,
Hmm.
Seta, yeah. And so, and that's true, like I can delineate the difference between like history can it's mostly taught in books and from other people, and I don't necessarily think that's statues are a statement, they're not a piece of history, you know. How should Californians in this specific case like understand that history, because I think every state has a different past, you know, like over here on the West Coast, it's like, yeah, we do have to grapple Spanish colonialism, and on the East Coast they have to deal with European colonialism, you know, like, you know, Britain, French, all of these other countries. So how can we tackle that? Should students know the hard truths of what happened to the Native American population?
Most definitely, because the history book is written by the victor,
Right.
um, and history needs to be taught with perspective.
Hmm.
There's always two sides to everything. I taught fourth grade, and
Hmm.
California Mission is one of the standards. I'm very glad that we have rewritten that. because the history books only talks about the victor side, which is the missionary side. They talk about converting Native Americans, and they talk about, oh, well, we help them, civilize. Well, I'm sorry, but they were living their own culture. They were living civilly within their own, native land. And here we have all these people that came over and basically converting people. And when they don't convert, that they get punished. They get I don't think the books ever talked about how when Native Americans are refused to convert, that they are being tortured, that they are they don't they make sure that they starve them. They put them out in the sun. They do so many things to them that we would call it torture, and thus I mean, this is the perspective that we don't teach, that students don't get to hear. So definitely you have to really put out the hard truth for our students to decide, because our school system is set up way back when to fulfill the the roles of assembly line workers and widget makers, if you will. And the desks are set up in roles. It's education is not one size fits all. Right. Every student grows and matures and learn at their own pace. And so this is something that the folks who are non-educators don't quite understand, because they think, oh, well, they attended, public schools. They use their experience as something that they would use to make decisions. Many of the lawmakers, have never set foot in a classroom in teaching a class of 20 kids or 24 kids, or in the upper grades sometimes 40, 45 kids, 49 kids. I've actually had a class of fourth graders class of 42 fourth graders. So there's so many things out there. There's so many, like, I guess you would say, people who are in decision making don't realize, don't see the struggles in what we call the frontline workers now, which is our educators, our teachers, our teachers aid, the cafeteria workers, the school bus drivers, the maintenance worker, the custodian, the office staff. So from the homeschool coordinator, you name it. They are the front line. They work with the students. They understand the day-to-day struggle. And every student comes in with, on a daily basis, with their own baggage. Right. And so we need to understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs in order for Bloom's taxonomy to actually work. Maslow's hierarchy of needs needs to be filled, and so that's the one thing that I really want to get across. One of the reasons why I decided to run for school board is to really get at the forefront of conversations of education reform. People say our education system is broken. Well, it was set up for a certain system. It's set up for a certain way. And so now we are in the 21st century. So we need to look at it from a different perspective. We need to teach kids to think critically, to think creatively. We need to teach our students to communicate, to know how to communicate well, to collaborate, to cooperate, because our world is very different. We need to work with each other. So these are the important things that are being left out. And so, getting back to the questions of, all of these perspectives that needs to be in the room, because you know what, education is, like I said, not one size fits all,
That's
and unfortunately, we have the victors that determines how it's done.
that is very much true. And I wanted to kind of point out, if we do try to tackle this conversation of how native populations were affected by, say, the mission system, the Spanish colonial mission system, right? How, like, California itself has a large population of unrecognized tribes, and how are we going to try to tackle something like this when there's so many native nations within California that got decimated because of this mission system? And should it be local to that area? Like, we live in the San Gabriel Valley, like the Gabrielinos and the Tangva Nation, right?
Right,
They're an
right.
unrecognized um,
Hmm.
native tribe in California. And um, who gets to write, in this case, who gets to write the history books, and like, how can we be equitable in the places we live, and the education we
It's
give?
not so much about who gets to write it. I think it's about perspective.
Right.
And so we need to, hence ethnic studies is very critical,
Hmm.
because, there's so many different perspectives. And just by understanding that there is not one view,
Hmm.
we only see the victor's view, right?
Hmm.
We only see the missionary's view. We're only taught the missionary's view. We're only taught the Europeans' point of view. I mean, seriously, we couldn't pick a better day of discussing this because, everybody's like, happy 4th of July or happy Independence Day. Well, I said, the independence for what, for who, from what, and from who?
Hmm.
Because, I mean, this land was already here. There
Hmm.
were people occupying this land. And then we had a set of people that came from Europe that came over and basically, took over the land, stole it, actually, and then made these people into, calling them savages, calling them uncivilized.
Hmm.
What gives us that right? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so, these are, perspective that needs to be, put out there, and we need to, I guess, getting back to the question, who gets to write it? Well, we need to invite all of the elders from these native, tribes, to give us inputs.
Hmm.
They need to be at the table. They
Yeah.
need to be, their languages are forgotten. Um, One of the things that I am hoping to, be more involved with is to develop and work with, university to cultivate and develop, native, tribe, languages, because, it's being lost.
Hmm.
And I see that, even in our own culture. I mean, I feel so ashamed that I cannot speak Mandarin fluently.
Hmm.
I'm Chinese, but I can't speak Chinese fluently. I was, fortunately, I'm fluent in Vietnamese because I was born in Vietnam and that was my first language. So that's something that I really feel we need to focus in on, is showing our students pride in our own culture, in our own language, in our own history. And so each group gets to have that, because we need to celebrate each group with that. And the only way to do that is to invite them to share their culture. It's to invite them to come to the table to share the perspective and share what needs to be done. Because that's only then can we realize that we are actually truly embracing diversity.
I might be changing the subject a little bit away from racism, but you say that there's a hierarchy of needs that students that needs to be met, right?
Hmm.
um what do you see that's that schools are falling behind on what students need?
Well, I mean, the first thing is the physiological need,
Hmm.
and that is, of course, we're doing the best we can. That's why the food program, the family assistance program that I'm so proud to be involved with Garvey and also with KYC and Humber School District. All of these school district, all of these educators, all of a sudden is now turned into frontline workers of providing and collecting and providing food for our families in need. I mean, this pandemic really spotlights the difference and the inequities in the haves and the have-not, the privileged
Hmm.
the ones who are in poverty. I mean, for to hear my students having to go to work with their parents, having to sew masks to pay rent. Um, that to me is just very troubling. I mean, it's children should be actively playing, should be enjoying childhood, should be outside riding their bikes, should be playing with their friends, should be playing board games, card games, being kids. Rather in this case, they're being asked to be mature, and I know all about that because um, I was uh, I was forced to grow up very quickly at the age of 10. When my dad was legally blind, and my mom was the breadwinner, she worked 14 hours a day. That's where the difference is. White collar versus blue collar.
Hmm.
And then of course there's many of us who work on wages rather than on salary. So the white collars have certain hours of the day, and they get to come home to their families, and many times they don't have to work 12, 14 hours, and so kids are in those situations miss their parents. I have many of my students who don't see their parents, on a day-to-day basis because their parents has to work, 14-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. Those in food industry, they open, from 8 to 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and kids don't get to see their parents. And these are the type of things that are really missing. That's the hierarchy of needs. The physiological needs that
Hmm.
the mental, the social, the sense of belonging, the sense of love. All of those plays into what's missing with a lot of our low socioeconomic students, and that's why we need to have counselors, nurses at every single schools.
Hmm.
And guess what? First thing they cut those area. Many school districts have nurses that works 2 or 3 schools, and then they hire a nurse assistant to help in those sense. And many counselors are sharing schools, are having to work 2, 3 schools, and so that's a problem that we need to have. We need to fully fund public education, and this is where we really, really need to um,
Hmm.
focus. And if we are able to provide those those hierarchies of need for our low socioeconomic students, you'll see the difference. You see the
Hmm.
performance level rise up very quick.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking about the pandemic and how things are different and things are changing. There was something. This is totally unconfirmed, and this is also conjecture. We work with a lot of teachers in LA, and we work with folks out here in the San Gabriel Valley. But we're hearing that some teachers are not getting a hold of their students, and then learning that there is a discernible homeless population amongst students in high
Oh
school
yeah.
and within the the primary school, like elementary, middle school, high school. Yeah. And so it's getting tougher and tougher because if rent is not um being either subsidized or canceled or anything like that, like families have little to no options, given that the pandemic has been ravaging the United States. And then now, um with opening up, was a conversation last month. We're talking about closing it back up again. And so um how should we address those issues coming into the next school year, because it is coming up. It's July, it's early July right now. August is really coming up
It's just around the
sooner than you
corner.
think.
We're in July.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you in that. I mean, in terms of addressing that, I think many of us educators are making an attempt to address that, but we need our public leaders, our elected leaders, to really um, play a big role in this in regards to funding programs that are going to assist our homeless populations.
Hmm.
Reason why many of us are unable to locate our students, our students' families, and get into communication with them is that uh, you know parents lose their job, they can't pay rents, so now they're homeless. Furthermore, their internet connections or their phone lines get disconnected because they're unable to pay. Um, you know, the governor talked about, well, he put a decree down where, people can't be evicted. People can't, phone lines can't be turned off. The utilities cannot be turned off. But guess what? Those are for your working class, your middle class, your upper class, whatever. But when you deal with low socioeconomic poverty level families, you're talking about families sometimes are undocumented. And then also these low income families many times don't know how to access these programs. And so um, where where we need help is providing access for them to get a hold of these help, these programs that um, that helps with locating affordable housing. Um, this whole thing the governor talks about. Oh well, what was it? Spectrum was giving free internet for families. If you have school age students, that it'll be free for 2 months or 3 months or whatever not. But many of our families can't access these. In the first place, their internet gets disconnected, their phone gets disconnected. So now, where are they going to go to do that? And when you get to the Spectrum office or stores, um, what do you tell them? And of course, the sales folks, sales reps, don't know all the details. These are deals that are struck with corporates, and the corporate doesn't tell the salespeople, oh well, you have somebody that comes in and can't afford to pay it, you direct them to this person, it doesn't work that way, and it's like it's one of those things where don't ask, don't tell, kind of thing. So there is that fine inequities, and it's really being spotlighted very heavily during this pandemic, because you see that the folks who are educated, that are able to do all these things, they're surviving. But the ones who uh, don't know how to access these things, that are not familiar with this, are going to need the extra help, and we're not doing enough to help these folks.
Yeah. And sometimes some families don't understand that, like, these programs are meant for them, like, or because the whole scare of public charge back at the tail end of last year, right? Like some parents are like, oh, can I get more extra food assistance because of the pandemic? Or, oh, like, can I
Right.
can I obtain this program where I can get internet for my child? And I think that there is a current fear of that idea of, if you obtain one thing, it cancels something else out. But this is, that fear right now. It's like, this is this is a extraneous circumstance, and like, these things are meant to um help at a situation where you can't get yourself back up. And this is absolutely not to the fault of your own. Like, this is a pandemic. No one has control over something like this. And if it's any indication right now in the United States, it's like, yeah, we don't 100% understand or got a handle of what's going on with this current situation.
I mean, someone who is the head of the entire United States.
Hmm.
Um, y'all call him president, but a president he is definitely
Hmm.
not. Doesn't act like one. Um, doesn't speak like one. Um, Certainly doesn't lead like one. And I mean, seriously, uh, you have a chance to make a difference. I
Hmm.
mean, a single person can make such a huge difference, and yet he chooses not to. He
Hmm.
chooses instead to antagonize, um, to add oils to fires. Um, I mean, he's such an instigator.
Hmm.
So uh, we need to do better. And you know what? I'm sorry, at the national level, maybe not, but we certainly can do something at the local level. We certainly
Hmm.
can do something at the state level. Uh, I'm proud to be living in the state of California, where our governor gets it, and he's doing a lot of things right. It's not perfect. There's no one size fits all solutions, but he's getting the right people to help with the decision making. And so that's what we need. We need people to come together. We need people to really look at how uh, the ones who are capable can help the ones who are not, and that's where our elected officials can come in.
Hmm.
I want to point out that Dr. Judy Chu is doing everything she can from the national level. Hilda Solis is doing what she can as our supervisor, and getting out there, giving out foods, giving out, the other day she was giving out 1,000, Kindle Fire to kids who don't have access to technology. These are the type of things that we need for to help our students, especially if we're gonna like roll out and reopen schools in the fall.
Yeah.
And seriously, when we're in a pandemic like this, who really is going to have the mental capacity to focus in on learning?
Hmm.
That's my question. And that's what I've been putting out there to uh, to superintendents, to school board members. Not only that, but to my own school superintendent and school board members. I mean, do we really expect people to be able to focus
Hmm.
when they're trying to just plainly survive? And in Garvey School District, over 70% are free and reduced lunch. Um, and I mean, these families desperately needs the help, and we're not getting it
Hmm.
from our elected leaders. And I mean, there are many that are doing what they can, but we need all of them. We need all of us to pitch in and do something.
You were talking about opening up schools again, and I think LA County release rules on that. I don't know if these are going to change, because this is This was during the time when there was slight optimism about opening up and talks of trying to get things to a new normal. Just your personal opinions. What do you expect would happen by the time August rolls around, when students are coming back to a school that some students may not recognize? Yeah.
Well, I mean, definitely we need to have options.
Hmm.
Um, listen to the parents. If you're gonna put a survey out there, then listen to the parents. If you're gonna put surveys out there to your employees, for the staff, listen to the surveys. Um, I don't know the answer to it,
Hmm.
but what I do know is that we need to come together. We need to work together. We need to have plan A, B, and C, and D and E,
Hmm.
because there's this pandemic changes by the minutes. Um, it changes by the days and the minutes, and so what the county recommends right now may look totally different in August.
Hmm.
Um, the numbers are rising. We're looking at closing everything back again. I mean, come on, think about it. I mean, why are we succumbing to the pressures of privateers? Um, I don't get that. Is money so much more important than the lives of people? And depending on who you ask, they're gonna say, "Oh yeah." I mean,
Hmm.
look at all of these Republican leaders in Texas and throughout the states, throughout the country, saying, "Oh yeah, we can sacrifice a few lives."
Hmm.
I mean, we're in a pandemic; it happens. But we got to move on. I'm like, really? Uh, I mean, where is your heart? Where is the compassion? I mean, we're in a pandemic. And the only way that we are going to survive this pandemic is to work together.
Hmm.
And it doesn't seem like many of our senators, gets this. I mean, they're sitting at home. They're sitting at home rather than going back to work and voting on this package that's going to help people and it's going
Hmm.
to help the economy go back. I mean, people are in desperate needs. I mean, there's going to be chaos if you don't provide the help. People are going to get desperate. Um, Crimes are going to go back. And then what? I mean, so we need to really, really come together and work together. I can't stress that
Hmm.
enough. Because the only way we can survive these kind of uncharted water is by working together.
Yeah, it's almost almost feels like it is some political leaders are were thinking or hoping that, oh, this will just be 2 or 3 months or a situation pandemic, but
It's going to
back
be
in,
2 or 3 years at the
yeah,
very least.
and it's there's no easy answers or solutions to something like this, and so yeah, it's not an optimistic outlook, but at the same point, it's like, it's about working together, and it's about meeting people at where they are, with needs of housing and income, um and having students be educated, because I think there are some students that's like they're missing their teachers, or they're kind of getting tired of doing distance learning, and I've heard one student say, it's like if I was in college right now, I'm gonna choose never to do an online class. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you can ask any teachers; they want to see their students.
Hmm.
We miss our students just as much as our student misses us, and we want to come back. Believe me, especially our primary teachers. We want to see them. We want to see their smiles. We want to give them their hugs. but it's got to be done in a safe way.
Mm-hmm.
And until we figure out how it is done safely, um, and there isn't a right way. There isn't one single way, and that's why it's very important that top leaderships in each school district, meaning the school board, meaning the superintendent and the administrators, they need to sit down with the teachers, with the classified staff, with the parents, and most importantly, the students,
Mm-hmm.
because and then you need to include the community in there as well, because the community can help. The community wants things to be open because it affects them business wise, and
Mm-hmm.
so if they want it to be open sooner, they need to help out in getting things back to the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we're ever going to get it back to the way it was,
Yeah.
because people don't heed warnings. Uh, we could have totally like nailed this in the first 2 months if everybody stayed home, but instead, I mean, people went to the beach, people did what they wanted to do. Um,
Yeah.
it's about the community. It's about doing what's right, and that's where we're missing a lot, especially in the public school setting. Is that
Yeah.
we're so you know our mind is so set on these like test scores,
Mm-hmm.
and guess what? The ones who have the money is dictating the dialogue, is dictating the conversations, and the conversation right now is test scores, test scores, test scores,
Mm-hmm.
performance, performance, performance. But guess what? That's not what education is about. It's about teaching our kids to be contributing members of society. That's the exact word that John Wooden told me when I asked him, "Hey, coach, I'm a brand new teacher. What can you advise me?" And that's exactly what he told me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and we need to teach our kids to have compassion, to have kindness, to learn to work with each other, to communicate well, to be themselves, to think critically, to think creatively, to use their imagination, and to not be afraid to fail. And these are the things that are not shown up on the test course.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the conversation that we need to have. And look at the helms of the Secretary of Education. Never set foot, in a public classroom ever in her entire lifetime, and yet, I mean, she's the Secretary of Education. How is that possible? How can someone who we don't go to, you and I don't have that authority to go tell doctors how to treat people, right? I
Right.
mean, because we're not qualified,
Mm-hmm.
and yet here, why in God's name that they do this to public educations?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that.
Yeah,
We
and
need better.
yeah, and almost like when I was in high school, it was right during the housing crisis and like that dip in the economy. It's like '08, '07,
Yeah,
and like year after year, it was easy to say cut funding to education, and cut the music program, cut the athletics program, and cut health and safety, and
at the arts.
and the arts, and those things are very much important, and for me to understand like things like say filmmaking and media, it's like you can understand, oh, there's an inherent bias to what I'm watching because you understand how editing works, or you understand how things are being created, and those things are very important to be like, well, at least for me personally, to be measured and to some degree unbiased, right? And so well, I was getting with that. Oh yeah, it was like the defunding of schools, and to your point of like people that makes these decisions aren't necessarily educators or like professionals that are within those um professions, you know, like it. I think if you want to say the biggest example, you know, we currently have this idea that this guy that's currently in office is this hotshot businessman, but you know, like learn the record, you know, it's like not many of his businesses ever worked out, you know, and so he may be a strong negotiator and like, you know,
He knows how to work the systems.
yeah, he knows how to work the system. He's a savvy person when it comes to social media. He understands, I think, one of the only people over the age of 70 that understands social media and media in general, you know, and he knew how to play it. He knew the right words, you know, in some cases, you know, and in the connection of defunding schools and things like that, I want to head into the next conversation about defunding police. And um, what I had in our notes is this idea that, you know, as I was leaving school, my schooling, right, San Gabriel High School, class of 2012, by the way, I started noticing more police presence at school, in these school resource officers. And I thought, okay, this is interesting, but I never really put too much thought into it because I was like grad transitioning out, I was matriculating into college, and so it wasn't something in my forefront of my mind. But when stuff like George Floyd was happening, and I think when I was still in college, it's like these cases of people of color were being harassed by school police, you know. um, if if we do if the conversation of defund the police is happening, like what are we going to do with these school resource officers in our schools, because these are to some degree our police in our school systems. And I think New York, I think the New York mayor just, um, instead of just outwardly defunding the police, they just basically move a budget item so a school district can deal with it, you know.
With regards to school resource officers, you know, I don't know much about it, but here's my thoughts.
Hmm.
Um, if we properly fund public education like we should,
Hmm.
then we don't need them. We don't need police officers on campus at all, because what's missing? Counselors, nurses, you know, psychologists. Um, these are the people who help our students understand, um, you know, and you know, when it gets to the point where it becomes violent is when students are at their peak. um, you know, in Aurora, Colorado, Columbine, right? uh, the two, you know, the two guy that basically uh, went out and shot people. They were up to their wits. They were being bullied, which counselors would have been able to at least help in that sense to de-escalate. But you know, there wasn't enough support in that sense. Um,
Hmm.
and so, you know, I mean, many of the students afterward, I read that in a survey of the students from Columbine, many of them came from very, very wealthy families, and were asked, you know, uh, would you rather have, you know, your parents' money or your parents' time? And overwhelmingly, the majority of them says we would prefer our parents' time over the money, because many of them get whatever they want. They're all driving, you know, BMWs, nice cars. I mean, these are high schoolers.
Hmm.
And so, with regards to defunding the police and their roles of school resource officers, um, you know, do we actually need them if we properly fund public education?
Hmm.
And that's my question. Is that, you know, when we properly fund something, you can see it works. I mean, our teachers, our educators are amazing people. They've been successful without all of these resources. Imagine what they can do with the proper resources.
Hmm.
You know, and that's why, like many of us, we spend a lot of our own pockets, money out of our own pockets to make things work for our kids. That's why my students, my former students, still remember me because they know I care about them, and I built relationship with them, and so that's why, you know, they're when I need them to do something, when I call on them, they answer. You know,
Hmm.
we still keep in touch. You know, and these are the kind of things that you know. That doesn't get talked about in public school settings, you know, with you know, I mean, that's I look at some of the programs, you know, the STARS programs and the DARES program.
Hmm.
That's awesome, but if we properly fund education in the mental health department, uh, we wouldn't even get to that point.
Hmm.
So that's my thought process as far as you know, the SROs are concerned. You know, I don't know too much about it because, you know, I myself are, you know, I've been teaching for 24 years in the elementary level.
Hmm.
We don't see police officers unless it's like once a month for our DARES program that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
You know, the STARS program, I see at my last school, I see the deputy comes in, you know, I think every 2 weeks or so,
Hmm.
you know, and they have good conversations with the kids.
Hmm.
Um, but, you know, I mean, these are the conversations that counselors should be having with the kids instead. So, um,
Hmm. It's true. It's like you work in an elementary school, and when I was in high school, it's like I was transitioning out, so I didn't see the net effect of having that police presence when I was a student. I'm just, you know, it's something that's been omnipresent for LA students, you know, like, you know, Wilson, Lincoln, MC, and all of those places, and I think it's being pushed to the forefront because you know, this current movement of where should our budget be allocated. You know, if say our public servants, in this case police, has like millions of dollars to fund, I guess apparently a tank, you know, like they have millions of
well,
dollars to do riot gear, like and year after year they're defunding school systems and cutting programs and things like that. And then it took a pandemic for us to have these conversations, apparently.
well, here's my other question. Since you brought up high school, you know, I went to Marquette High School. We didn't have police on campus. We
Hmm.
have campus supervisors.
Yeah.
Having school resource officers on campus takes another job position away from our classified staff,
True. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I remember we had campus supervisors. One of the campus supervisors happens to be my former basketball coach. You know, he coached
Hmm.
basketball, so you know we had good relationship. You know, it's like, you know, and when he's sitting there on the T intersections of our hallways, people know him. You know,
Hmm.
he interacts with the students, and students knows him. I mean, you're always going to have your few moments of fights and whatnot,
Right.
right? And you need people to break those up. But other than that, I mean, um, and here's the other thing too, is that how often do you see police officers or school resource officers in school districts like San Marino,
Hmm.
Beverly Hills, Arcadia, La Cañada, Palos Verde? You know, you only see them in, you know, like poor neighborhoods. What are they trying to say? You
Hmm.
know, what's the communication here? What's the message? So, uh, and that's the other thing too, is that we don't have enough um, people of colors or in the teaching field. We need to do a better job of recruiting and retaining people of colors in the school setting, in the public school setting, because um, believe it or not, teachers are role models. And, when a full class of, 80% African Americans being taught by a white person, think how far the connection is going to be.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I noticed this very clearly whenever I speak Vietnamese to my students, they perk up. It's like, oh, wow, and you see the difference. They all of a sudden starts to perform better because they look up, they pay attention. Hey, there's somebody that looks like me, and again, look at all of the textbooks. You and I grew up, I went to school in the 80s, and 90s. You look at those textbooks and there is nobody that looks like you and I.
Yeah.
I mean, we're slowly getting there nowadays because we have more authors, from a more diverse population of authors. But we're still struggling in the areas of textbooks.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's where that's the reason. That's another reason why I choose to run for school board, because we don't have enough people of colors in administrations and school boards. You look at the majority of the school board members across the state. I mean, we have to be better. We need to encourage folks like you and I to be running for elected offices, because we're in the trenches. We understand our people so much better.
I was gonna say, speaking of histories and what taught it, what's been taught in schools is like, I remember when the chapters for the Vietnam War came up in high school, and it just had a very U.S. centric view, and it never talked about the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, or the Khmer Rouge, was just a paragraph in those things. And like, to be fair, yeah, my inherent bias is, I'm Cambodian. Like, I want to know and understand that history. It's like, I want to understand, like, oh, there is a huge population of Cambodian, not just in the West Coast, but on the East Coast, and like that history of movement, and for the Vietnamese community, it's like there's this long storied history of racism that they had to deal with in the South, when they all moved to Houston, to Texas, to Louisiana, and took up the fishing industry and the shrimping industry. Like the KKK wanted to, like, basically murder Vietnamese in their boats. And these are things that I think if taught in such a way, it's like we can move above racism and understand that history of, like, there are people in power that want to push other people down, because there's inherent bias. And so,
well, here's my take on that, is that you have the 1% who have their privilege and have their way of life.
Right.
When you have an increased number of people that don't look like you, that are slowly rising to power, rising to understanding of what's going on, you all of a sudden now feel threatened, because what's going to happen to your way of life? So what you do is you dumb down the masses, you basically starve them, and then throw a little crumb, and then tell them to fight each other for it. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And then until we come together, and that's why this Black Lives Matters movement is so critical, that we all must embrace it, especially people. You know, we have stereotype that, you know, this whole racism too, that we are taught.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the immigrant populations, the Asian population. You know, I mean, it's like I have to slowly change my parents' point of view about African Americans. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, it's like they are people, and you know, it's going to take many of us to confront our own stereotype, our own racism, our own um, unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we have to do better as a human race. Otherwise, we're going to be a race. Uh, you know, I mean, it's just that plain and simple. You know, and everybody who goes out there and throws this term that all lives matter. Yes, all lives matter only if Black lives matter. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're saying that all lives matter and you don't care about what happened with George Floyd, then how the hell do you know, can say that all lives matter?
Yeah. And it in terms of like teaching race and history and in the high schools or in the elementary schools, it's just almost as if it's taught as something as like, oh, we've dealt with it and we're done, you know, and it's not a continued conversation. And I think that's something that's been missing in I think in the public school system. It's like, oh, it's not, yeah, it's like they're taught
It's checklist,
it's taught as driving Miss Daisy versus do the right thing, you know.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
it's basically a checklist,
yeah.
you know, and we, as an educator, I truly believe we need to teach our kids to think critically,
Mm-hmm.
to think creatively, to be their innovative self. And as an educator, I see my job as to look at my students and see what they're good at and
Mm-hmm.
point them in that direction. Because it's not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
Students learn differently. Students are given with different gifts and and talents. And you know, you're good at this whole journaling thing, this whole, you know, podcasting stuff. I'm good at something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we need to look at the talents that are coming to us and unleashing that,
Mm-hmm.
and pointing that out to our students, because you know, they need guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Education is about it's not about reading, writing, arithmetics.
Mm-hmm.
It's about building the next generation to be better than the ones before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's about teaching our youngs to care, to love, to be kind, to choose kindness, to have compassion, to be able to collaborate and cooperate, and to problem solve. And that's what is missing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, where we're being targeted, we're being, you know, dictated to this conversation, this dialogue about achievement gaps, about test scores, about performance, about raw data. All that is fooey. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you can't get a kids to have 3 meals a day, and emotionally, you know, right, how is that child going to learn? You
True.
know, so I mean, if we're not able to do that correctly, then how on earth are we going to be able to get our kids to what they need to be?
Yeah.
And so um, this whole inequity is just nobody talks about it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everybody talks about the achievement gaps, but does anybody talk about the resource gap, the opportunity gaps? You know, we're
Mm-hmm.
slowly heading towards that direction, because a number of us educators are purposely using these terminologies because it should be our conversation, not someone else's.
uh, I think you also mentioned something about bias. Sorry, there's a motorcycle right outside my window. I'm like barely concentrating. But anyways, um, but you didn't mention something about achievement gaps and biases amongst the Asian American community. And I was just thinking, I was having this long conversation about how the in the education system, the model minority myth, like that East Asians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans they excel in schools, but the number dictates differently. And I know this is not a I don't know if you caught that, but that was two loud motorcycles going by my house. Anyways, but um, it wasn't necessarily in my list of topics, but this idea of model minority and like how we kind of put Chinese, Japanese American, Korean Americans on a pedestal in a sense that, oh, that these are the communities that you should aspire up to. But at the same point, like, you're saying that there's a resource gap and all of these things, that a lot of our students are Southeast Asian, South Asian, they um come from situations where their families survive genocide or conflict nations, and now I'm hearing that there's going to be a new greater well, if immigration was like it was during the Obama years, like I think the Burmese and like the or the places like Myanmar would be like the big immigrant class that's coming to the U.S. because of what's happening to
Oh yeah,
ethnic Muslims in
political
that area.
persecution.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's like addressing those needs, because yeah, I'm Cambodian and you're Vietnamese, and like we're seen as, oh, like, you know within the numbers, like we're not excelling in those fields yet, um
The whole thing with the model minority myth again, it's that a banker throws a little piece of crumb,
mhm,
and say, hey, watch out for that guy. He's gonna take your share, right?
mhm,
The thing with this is that that's why we need to push for desegregation of data. When you desegregate the data, you see the inequities. Um, the Japanese Americans, many are fourth, fifth generations.
mhm,
Um, the Koreans, second, third, fourth generation. Same with Vietnamese. Then the Chinese. But like I mean, there are so many groups within the API that you can't lump all of us together,
mhm,
and that's what they want people to see, uh, is that they want to lump us all together and say, hey, look, the Asian can do it. Why can't
mhm,
you? Again, it's putting a wedge. You know, it's
mhm,
putting a wedge between us and the Latinos and the African Americans and the other groups that you want to put in there.
mhm.
That's why people. It's funny because my niece asked me about affirmative actions, and she
Yeah.
was being annoyed with all of her friends and families who are complaining about affirmative actions. And it says, that sucks. Isn't fair because, like, we're Asians, and we can't get into this and we can't get into that, and
Mhm.
they fall trapped into this whole wedge again, right? Why are we fighting against our brothers and sisters who are Latinos, or Latinx, or African Americans? We
Mhm.
should be fighting what's at the top for putting
Mhm.
that, for not giving us enough um, opportunities, or for not giving enough resources into that, right?
Mhm.
So um, that's the one thing that we need to come together on this, and that's why we need to support it, because opportunities makes that big difference.
Mm-hmm.
You and I got our opportunities because someone pioneered that, right?
Yeah.
Someone went before us and paved the way because they got an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just like Michelle Obama said, when you succeed, you need to look back, you need to extend your arm, and you need to grab somebody else's arm and pull them with you. And until each one of us does that, we're going to continue to fight amongst each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the opposition wants. They
Mm-hmm.
want us to fight against each other, and they sit back and watch and laugh at us,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so we need to like really, really think about how we go about these things.
Yeah.
And again, until we come together, until we learn to come together, we're not going to make it, you know. And that's why this movement is so so incredibly important for us to
Mm-hmm.
be involved, and it's sustaining, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's building momentum. And I see a revolution coming, not in terms of, you know, a war or something like that, you know, maybe perhaps, I don't know, but I see a movement that's going to cause a revolution in the world of inequality, in terms of racism, in terms of, you know, you know, building equities and equalities for all.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, hopefully that's going to help us bring us all together, and coming together to really, you know, fight this racism, this disease of just, you know, like intolerance.
Mm-hmm. Um, just to start finishing up some of these points, you we talked about a little bit of affirmative action. I've had a situation where um, someone was talking to me about it wasn't necessarily um, a conversation, more that he was expressing his frustrations, you know. But right now, um, at least in the state of California, there is a ballot measure to repeal Prop 209, which passed in back in the 90s to, you know, to basically stop affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
And um and now there's this renewed conversation of like, what is affirmative action, what does it mean? And um you know, the language there is like they're saying that that 209 was a way to stop racism, right? Do you think affirmative action is inherently racist, or is it like, I do believe it was something that to try to get people in low income communities to college, you know, like to have access to higher education. But what do you feel about those arguments, you know, that like this is something that is racist in nature, you know?
You know, I don't think affirmative action is racist,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense it's something that was pushed to give opportunities where opportunities were not given
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. And so I firmly believe in it,
Mm-hmm.
in that we need to support it, uh, because we need to give everyone a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And if some, you know, the whole thing in terms of equal access, right? Equity
Mm-hmm.
piece. I don't know if you've ever seen this little cartoon shown side by side, right? Equality. Yeah, it shows three people: a short little kid, a medium size, you know, maybe teenager, and adults, right? So you got three heights, and they got equality is giving everybody the same number of like heights in terms of the crates, right? So the taller ones is even taller, um, even though you give that little the same height crate, the shortest one still can't. So they're basically, this cartoon is showing three people looking over a fence at a baseball game or a game, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you have one side where all the crates are the same, and then the tall person is even higher, and the medium person is a little higher, but the short one still can't see. They can't see over the fence. However, with equity, with equal access, well, the tall one's already able to see over the fence, so they don't need it. The middle one needs a little help, so they got a little one to boost them right over so they can see over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
The shortest one needs the most help, and that's where the equity comes in place, where we take what would have been given to this tall person over to the short person, and so that way this person can also see. So now, guess what? All three are able to see the game.
Right.
Whereas the other ones, only one person can see the game. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's how I would analyze and I would put affirmative actions, and that's where I would support it, because I guess people can put different spins on it,
Yeah.
but the whole idea is to give equal access, otherwise not given to people that so yeah, I mean, my daughter was complaining because like she couldn't get into UCLA because there was a quota of a certain number of applicants that they're going to accept with Asian surname. Well, I mean, the UC systems, they buck all of that numbers because they want the majority of their numbers to go to foreign students because they can collect more money. And that's the whole, that's that whole greed. It's like, again, it goes back to the mighty dollars. It's like profit over people. And we need to change that. People over profit.
If it becomes so politicized, and if it's not there, like what can be other ways to level that playing field? And I've heard that having community colleges free, that's probably one way of doing that.
It's already done.
Yeah. And so
it's already done. In 2023, all community colleges throughout the state of California is going to be free.
And in reference to the conversation I had with my friend about affirmative action, it's like to some degree, when I was going into Cal State LA, it wasn't necessarily a guaranteed thing until I applied for the Equal Opportunity Program, which is basically Cal State LA's version of
EOP.
Their version of affirmative action. And I was trying to give a fair shake and say, look, listen, like I'm willing to have this conversation about affirmative action, but I'm going to let you know I'm going to have some inherent bias because that's one of the ways I got into college. I'm not of the background, or not necessarily the smarts of East Asian model minority of like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, or South Asians in particular, Indians, right? That can't easily go to these prestigious colleges, right? And so, like, I had that a little extra help to get me in there, and plus they got a sweet $1,000 scholarship out of it too. So, so I just to close out, because I think this is probably the longest podcast I've had so far. But for you, like, if elected, right, and things might not get done immediately if shown by other public leaders, but what is one thing, your one singular thing that you want to change within AUSD, if you get elected and go to your full term? What is that one thing that
improve in the communications with the students, with the parents, with the teachers, staff, and community. is to have consistent communications so that we can have transparency when it comes to dealing with the budget, when it comes to dealing with decision making, when it comes to decisions of the curriculums, of all the major issues or decisions that a school district needs to make. You know, performances. I think Hamburg's school district teachers and staff are doing a magnificent job already. What I see missing is transparency. A lot of times things are very last minute. Things don't get communicated, and the one thing that I see that was missing, at least what my former students are telling me, is that certain schools are invisible to the school board, to the district. Um, so they felt unheard. They felt that when they go to the school board meeting, when they speak up, that they get chastised for it, that they get turned away, that they are not heard, that they don't, that nothing gets done. And so I want to make sure that that is that's going to change. And the one thing that I want to improve on is having open, honest dialogues, conversations with all stakeholders when it comes to big decision making, the budget, the curriculums, the safety of students, their health, both physical health and mental health. So there are so many things, but bottom line goes back down to communication and transparency.
So bridging the gap of
Right.
having
Exactly.
the school board not be this monolith in schools,
Yes.
and being having communication between families and students. So
Right.
that, I think that's a good place to end on. Hopefully we could talk again in the future, on
Sure.
this definitely on this podcast. I'm sure we're gonna have more conversations in the future, especially during the food program. But other than that, I just want to say thank you for listening. I hope you, um, look more deeply and inwardly about education and the education of your students, or your children. Talking to the listeners. Um, oh, before we sign off, Ken, do you have like social media, or do you have anything that people can follow you on?
My Facebook page, Ken Tang, also my page for Ken Tang for Alhambra School Board
Mm-hmm.
is up there. I think you can search it up. I'm in the process of developing my webpage, so I can share that once it's out. Actually, I'm working with a former student and two colleagues, one from the south and one from up north, that's developing my webpage for me. And so I'm working on all of getting them all the content so they can put it all together. So I'm excited. I'm hoping that we can kick it off next week sometime.
All right. So you heard it. So your Facebook, Kentang for Alhambra School Board, right?
Yes.
And once that website comes live, I'm gonna definitely link that in the description. So I hope everybody.
And yeah, and if you're if you live in the Alhambra School District area, and you'd like to get to know more of who I am and the other candidates, feel free to host a candidates forum of some sort, and I'll be glad to be there. Yeah.
I don't know if that's my responsibility. That's a lot, but
I'm just talking to your audience.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That's fair. Is there a link for that, or information for that?
We can probably set something up. I can like host that and put like a Zoom out or a
Mm-hmm.
WebEx or some sort of platform that we can have people log on and ask questions and share their concerns and their suggestions
Mm-hmm.
because it's the only way to learn more about the candidates and their visions about what leadership in the Alhambra School Board looks like.
Yeah, and to those that live in the Alhambra and on the local level, please vote. Coming up election November. If it's anything, if you want to put it in some sort of perspective, yes, president is very much important, but things that affect you on a local level are very important. And so voting for school board and doing voting for local laws, those are important too. So
Well, I just want to interject how important the president's race is
yeah.
because if you notice, since this guy took over, he's turned our country back 50 years.
Hmm.
He's put in two Supreme Court justices that are very conservative.
Hmm.
That is going to take everything that we've worked for the last 50 years and reverse many of those decisions. And the
Hmm.
other important things, especially if you're looking at the field of education, look who is our Secretary of Education. The boss is so unqualified. And the
Hmm.
President of the United States is the only person that can fire her and hire somebody who actually knows what education is about.
Hmm.
So, just from those 2 points, that is the most important things that I see as far as elections of our lifetime.
True.
Because we cannot have another 4 years of this craziness.
Hmm. Thank you for watching. Hope you like and subscribe, and I hope you can follow Ken, because we've had so many good conversations about the future of education. So thank you for listening. All right, we'll see you on the next video. Bye, y'all.